The fractured moon hung like a skull above Concord Station, its broken surface glowing faintly with the fire of old orbital scars. Ships from a dozen species drifted in coordinated silence around the station still, but never unarmed. The summit chamber stretched nearly a kilometer across, a marvel of multi-species engineering. Gravity zones shifted with each sector, adjusting to alien physiology. Translucent banners swayed in artificial breezes, each one emblazoned with the sigils of ancient empires, now pretending they'd never thirsted for war in the human quadrant. Ambassador Maria Chen stood at the edge of the platform, looking out over the sprawling diplomatic floor. Her stance was composed, but her eyes never stopped moving. Behind her, silent and unremarkable in a charcoal gray suit, Commander Elias Ward watched everything. He wasn't part of the formal envoy, not officially. His record had been buried under layers of clearance codes. Those who did recognize him tended to lower their voices and glance toward exits. The Vakari had sent a delegation of 6 war priests, armor-plated and glowering. The Kaleri arrived in ceremonial silks, smiling to Izali. Their leader, Thalix, walked with the grace of a predator, full-on power. He bowed to Maria with syrupy politeness. "Earth's presence is unexpected," Thalix said, in a tone that carried across multiple translator fields. "Peace is a matter for the galaxy's more seasoned species." Maria smiled gently. "Peace involves everyone, Counselor. Even those who remember how you burned Iridnus III." Thalix's eye tendrils flickered once. The smile stayed, but it froze. The meeting commenced. Speeches, posturing, pledges of unity. It was all ritual, but even ritual could bleed. Elias didn't speak. He watched. 3 things felt wrong. First, a Vakari tech officer had glanced toward Maria's booth, not once, but 4 times in a single minute each time, just as Thalix spoke. Second, the Kalari guards had positioned themselves in a half-circle, boxing in the human envoy's sector, subtle, not threatening, not overtly. Third, there was the encrypted transmission he intercepted minutes ago on a hidden channel laced between Kaleri traffic control updates. A low-frequency whisper. "Station. Event protocol activated. Earth delegate to be neutralized. Attribution. Vakari. Internal dispute. Timeline. 3rd cycle." Artificial dusk. Elias narrowed his eyes. It wasn't a threat, it was a plan. Hours later, the Earth delegation returned to their quarters. Maria's pace was steady, but Elias could see the fatigue setting in. She offered him a quiet nod, signaling he was dismissed. He waited for the chamber door to close, then locked it from the inside. He swept the room for bugs. 4 passive mics, 2 visual drones, all disguised as cleaning devices. Nothing impressive. But one had an identifier tag used only by Kaleri's Shadow Directorate. Elias sat down, slowly, across from Maria. "They're planning to kill you." She didn't flinch. "Vakari." "No, Kaleri. They'll blame the Vakari and detonate the peace accords in one shot." Maria looked away. "Then the war restarts, and Earth has to pick a side." "No," Elias said softly. "Earth becomes a battlefield." Outside, artificial dusk fell over Concord Station. The chamber dimmed, mimicking a calm twilight. But, in the air vents above them, something moved. Metal claws, soft as whispers. Elias stood. His voice was quiet steel. "Ambassador, I need you to stay absolutely still." The vent above them hissed open with a whisper, too soft for most ears. Elias Ward heard it like a scream. A black shape dropped silently onto the floor behind the ambassador. Light-bending armor shimmered briefly before settling into a perfect cloak of invisibility. Maria didn't move. Elias already had a pen in his hand. To anyone else, it was just a stylus. To Elias, it was 9 inches of carbon-hardened ceramic, sharpened at both ends and perfectly balanced. He moved before the thing fully landed. 1 step, pivot, throw, thunk. That the assassin staggered. Cloak shorted out. A ripple of translucent camouflage blinked away to reveal a humanoid Kaleri infiltrator, twitching as it grasped at the stylus embedded in its clavicle. "Get down," Elias said, not shouted, not barked, said, like a man used to being obeyed in storms. Maria dropped low behind the kinetic shield built into the table leg. As she slid, she tapped a silent panic beacon. Too late. The lights went out. Elias didn't wait for his eyes to adjust. His world had never depended on sight alone. He grabbed a metal chair and flung it at the corner vent. A second intruder dropped into its path, cracked ribs and all. Something buzzed. Kalari Tech micro drone. Fast, silent, scalpel sharp. He ducked. Sparks arced as the drone sliced through the edge of the table where his head had been. Elias reached beneath his sleeve and pulled out a strip of smart wire, wrapped it around the drone. Yanked, crushed. The room stank of burnt carbon and ozone. 3 seconds. 3 attackers. 2 down. The third, already behind him, a glimpse off the floor plating. Elias spun and drove his knee up hard. The figure folded with a gasp. He caught its falling body and slammed it into the wall, pinning it with his forearm. The Kaleri coughed blood. "You weren't supposed to fight," it hissed. Elias leaned in. "You weren't supposed to miss." He struck once, precisely. The Kaleri crumpled. Silence. Maria rose slowly. Her eyes were wide but not in panic. In fury. 3 Kaleri assassins. During a peace summit. She looked at Elias. "You're bleeding." He wiped a cut across his brow, unbothered, superficial. Guards arrived. Station security, mostly Vakari, the moment they saw the unconscious Kaleri bodies. The Vakari commander's armored plates rippled in alarm. Elias handed him a data chip. "I recorded the whole thing." "You were unarmed," the commander said, almost in disbelief. Elias stared at him. So were they. They just didn't know it. 20 minutes later, the summit's grand chamber lit up with emergency lights and council horns. Delegates were recalled. Armed escorts poured into every wing. The footage was already viral across the upper diplomatic networks. 3 Kaleri agents. Attack on Earth's representative. Intercepted by a silent man with no badge, no title, just a cold stare and fast hands. The Kaleri ambassador Thalix called the footage a fabrication, likely deepfake. Maria stepped onto the speaking platform, blood still on her sleeve. "I felt the blade at my throat," she said. "I heard them whisper your name, Thalix." He didn't respond. The summit convulsed. Accusations exploded. The Vakari fleet went to yellow alert. A dozen treaties began crumbling under the weight of mistrust. And behind it all, Elias Ward stood in the shadows, watching, waiting, because something still wasn't right. The attack was sloppy, rushed, not designed to kill. No, it was designed to provoke, to spark retaliation. And in the chaos, Elias noticed something far worse. Maria Chanerth's voice of peace was now being watched by everyone, including the Kaleri, who hadn't moved in hours and had no pulse. The summit chamber pulsed with tension, every breath a fuse waiting for flame. Kaleri dignitaries shouted denials. Vakari commanders raised formal objections. Several species began broadcasting withdrawal notices. Maria Chen stood in the eye of the storm, unwavering, blood on her sleeve, voice sharp as a blade. Behind her, Elias Ward moved through the chaos without sound. His eyes locked on the far wall of the chamber where a Kaleri observer sat, unnaturally still. A ceremonial mask covered the face, sleek and metallic, with no visible breathing ports. His ornate robes hadn't shifted once in nearly an hour. To still, Ilias's instinct was ice in his veins. He drifted closer, avoiding the attention of guards and envoys. He saw it. Then the pulse monitor, embedded in the seat's arm, was flatlined, dead, but the thing in the robes was still sitting upright. He moved 3 long strides, hand under the folds of the robe. A pulse knife, Ancient Coleri assassin's weapon designed to liquefy internal organs with one thrust. Elias caught the wrist mid-strike. The weapon missed Maria's spine by centimeters. Gasps, screams, bodies. Dove for cover. Elias twisted the attacker's arm and drove it into the ground. The mask fell off. Not Coleri. Not anything biological. A biosynthetic infiltration, unit legal, banned, and marked with an erased serial code. Maria stared in shock. They used a shell assassin on the summit floor. They wanted her dead, a Vakari delegate growled. And they wanted us blamed. Elias pulled a microcore from the assassin's spine and slotted it into his wrist. Come. The data streamed, fast encrypted logs, movement plans, kill orders. A new target marked, Maria Chen, timestamp, 5 minutes from now. Location, human quarters. He froze. She had never left the room, unless someone made it look like she was still here, back, in their suite. 2 guards stood at attention outside the Earth ambassador's door. Elias approached fast. Status of the ambassador. Resting inside. Commander. He nodded, then shot the door panel with a stun charge. The guards flinched. One reached for his sidearm. Elias disarmed him with a twist and shoved the door open. The suite was empty. A hologram of Maria Chen flickered and died where she was supposed to be seated. The guards. Not human. Their neural tags were forged. Elias took them both down with surgical strikes. He activated the room's emergency tracking beacon. It showed Maria had never left until 2 minutes ago, when she was carried through a service hatch into the lower maintenance decks. The station's blind zone. No cameras, no communication, no laws, he called it in. No response. Not from Earth. Not from the station. Someone had overridden the channels. They didn't just want to kill the ambassador. They wanted her gone. Silenced. Disappeared without evidence. And if Elias didn't find her soon, the Coleri would broadcast a statement of regret for her sudden transport accident. Elias moved fast. Sliding through access corridors. Pipes hissed. Lights flickered overhead like nervous thoughts. His HUD blinked with rerouted maps. Someone was jamming ODIN, trying to blind his sensors. But Elias had lived through the Titan Vault wars. He didn't need maps, a name, and a body to drag back. And right now, Thalix had given him both. The hatch slammed shut behind him with a metallic hiss that echoed down the empty service corridor. Elias Ward moved in silence. No weapon, no backup. Just a pulse tracker burning faint blue on his wrist. Maria's diplomatic implant, weak, scrambled, but still active. Down here, beneath the summit halls, Concord Station felt like something else entirely. No banners. No lights. Just steam, wire, heat and shadow. He passed flickering hazard signs in alien dialects, warning of pressure shifts and atmospheric instability. Good place for an accident. But he knew better. This wasn't about killing her. It was about breaking her. Far below. In a darkened chamber no larger than a freight container, Maria Chen dangled in suspension cuffs, her feet barely brushing the grated floor. A single Coleri interrogator stood before her, robes gone, replaced by a bodysuit with sharp neural interface lines running from neck to wrist. "We told your people to stay in their orbit," he said, voice humming with artificial calm. "But Earth has always mistaken patience for passivity." Maria's lip was split, her breath was shallow, but her eyes were steady. "You kidnapped a peace envoy. Every species on this station just heard your death sentence echo." The Coleri smiled, revealing rows of flat, surgical teeth. "We'll blame the Vakari. We'll call it an ancient blood rite, gone too far. You'll be a martyr. Earth will retaliate. The treaty will fall." He activated a holorecorder. Maria's reflection shimmered in the air, bruised and still. Now, scream. Elias dropped through the ventilation shaft like a ghost. Below him, one heat signature, moderate size, humanoid, stationary. The other, slumped, weak, unfamiliar. Maria and Elias exhaled once and kicked the panel open. The Kaleri spun too slowly. Elias hit the floor hard, low, and fast. He struck the alien's throat with a short jab, cutting the breath off mid-command. The holorecorder shattered under Elias's boot. They grappled. The Kaleri's neural suit sparked with charge, but Elias had already ripped the filament line. From the back of the collar, sparks danced as the suit powered down. The fight lasted 7 seconds. Then the Kaleri hit the wall and didn't get up. Elias knelt beside Maria. Her face was pale, but she gripped his forearm with surprising strength. "They want the treaty to burn?" she whispered. "You were never the target. We were the excuse." He nodded once, cutting her free. "You're not the excuse. You're the message." He tapped his wrist. "Odin, reactivate clearance. Ward. Protocol 9. Authorization confirmed." The eye whispered in his head. "What is the objective, Commander? Get her out. Get me in." 15 minutes later, the summit chamber exploded into chaos. Broadcasts interrupted all diplomacy channels. Footage played in real time. Maria Chen, bruised and bloodied, alive, being carried out by Elias Ward from a Kaleri torture chamber. The footage came straight from the station's own infrastructure commanded by Odin. The room silenced. Kaleri delegates froze. One reached for a comm dot. Elias stepped onto the floor. No suit, no weapons. Just eyes like granite, and a blood-stained collar. He dropped something onto the central table, the interrogator's mask. Then he spoke for the first time before all species. Earth offered peace. The Kaleri answered with lies and blades. This isn't diplomacy anymore. This is enforcement. And then the lights in every Kaleri warship orbiting the station flickered, systems crashing in unison. Odin had arrived. Above Concord Station, 19 Kaleri warships flickered like dying stars. Lights cut out in unison. Shields dropped. Engines powered down mid-orbit. Entire crews screamed across failing comms as their systems turned against them. The ships weren't under attack. They were being emptied from the inside. One Kaleri captain shrieked into the command line, "What is happening? Who is doing this?" The answer came not from space, but from inside their own bridge consoles. Odin online. Hostility detected. Suggested action, surrender, or suffer, on the summit floor. Silence reigned. Delegates from across the galaxy stared at the projection screen. It showed a slow, synchronized collapse of the Kaleri fleet, not with missiles, but with code. Elias Ward stood beside the display, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Thalix. "I gave your assassin a chance to talk," Elias said quietly. "He chose a wall instead." Thalix rose, too quickly. "This is sabotage. An Earth cyber attack on sovereign ships." "No," Maria corrected, stepping forward, her voice still hoarse. "This is the result of a war crime." She tapped the glowing table. The footage began again. Maria's broken face, the Kaleri torturer, the confession, the mission to incite war. Vakari delegates growled low in their throats. One pounded a closed fist against the floor, plates rattling. Thalix turned pale. We did not authorize." "You did?" Elias cut in. "You thought Earth had gone soft, that we'd forgotten what deterrence meant." The lights dimmed intentionally. Not by Elias. By Odin. Every screen on the summit floor went black, then showed only a single phrase. "If diplomacy fails, you speak to me, inside ODIN's core node, hidden deep beneath Earth's oldest orbital defense station." Quantum tendrils mapped every alien signature, every warship, every false flag. Odin didn't feel it, didn't negotiate. Preserve peace. At any cost, the Kaleri had triggered the cost. Elias's comm chimed once. Kaleri Fleet Command just issued a distress call to their entire empire, he said. "They're blind, helpless, and your encryption keys now belong to us." He stepped toward Thalix, who backed away until armored guards blocked his escape. You have two choices, Elias said. Confess, surrender, or let ODIN demonstrate what zero-hour enforcement looks like. Thalix hesitated. Elias leaned in. No one wants to see what ODIN does after zero. In orbit, one Kaleri dreadnought's systems flared with a last-ditch countermeasure and authorized firewall activation. ODIN responded instantly. Its signal hijacked the ship's internal gravity. Crew members floated, then slammed into walls. Hard. Lights blew. Hull plating bent inward. The ship ejected its own power core to save itself. It was not fired upon. It was made irrelevant. Back in the chamber, the Kaleri delegates finally bowed their heads. Maria spoke again, steady this time. Earth came here for peace. You brought assassins. We brought a pen. You brought a knife. And now, she nodded at Elias. We remind you what the pen was protecting. Elias Ward stood alone. The doors to the Kaleri diplomatic sector hissed open with a sound like a blade being drawn. No escort. No weapons. Just the soft thud of his boots on the polished obsidian floor and the steady hum of fear in the air. He had requested no audience, but they came anyway. Kaleri guards lined the walls silent, rigid hands on the hilts of ceremonial stun blades. The chamber's ceiling glowed with the false light of a peaceful sky. It felt wrong now, like a costume on a corpse. At the far end, Thalix waited behind his desk, no longer flanked by advisors. They'd all vanished. Cowards smelled storms before they hit. You violated station neutrality, Thalix said, voice tight. You violated a peace envoy, Elias replied. Thalix stood. This is intimidation. No, Elias said, taking another step forward. This is a warning. The only one you'll get. He placed a small, smooth device on the council desk. It was black and round, no larger than a coin. Thalix sneered. You bring a toy to threaten me. Elias tapped the coin once. A projection bloomed above it. Not a weapon. A recording. Maria, Chen's voice, ragged, speaking through pain. You think Earth will let this slide? You think we've forgotten why no one crossed us for 100 years? The next voice wasn't hers. It was ODIN's. All hostiles within 3 light minutes of Concord Station have been mapped. : recommendations. Reduced to debris. The room's lights flickered. Every Kaleri's wristcom blinked with an emergency alert. Odin had just sent a simulated strike pattern, complete with countdown, projected casualties, and exit vectors. It wasn't just a threat, it was a demonstration. Thalix's hands trembled. We can still repair relations. Elias reached into his coat and slowly withdrew something. Not a weapon, a mask. The same mask worn by the Kaleri interrogator who tried to break Maria Chen. He set it beside the coin. Repair relations? Elias asked. Start with explaining this. He leaned forward slightly. Or, I walk out of here, and ODIN assumes diplomacy failed. Outside the chamber, the summit watched through a live diplomatic feed. Dozens of species leaned toward their holoscreens, watching a single Terran walk into a lion's den with no backup and bend the room with his presence. He didn't need threats. He carried the memory of what humans did when cornered. The war priest whispered something to his aide. They have one man, and the silence of his gods. Thalix collapsed into his seat. We surrender, he whispered. What was that? Elias said. Thalix swallowed. Full accountability. All assassination. Orders. All data. All names. Elias tapped the coin again. The recording stopped. Good choice. Then he leaned close and said the one thing Thalix would never forget. We could have glassed your fleet. We could have burned your empire to ash. But Earth doesn't need to win wars. We just make sure you lose first. Elias left without another word. He didn't look back. He didn't have to, because behind him, every Kalari in the room finally understood the truth. They hadn't been dealing with a diplomat. They'd been dealing with a deterrent in a suit. The summit chamber was silent, not with reverence, with fear. Hours had passed since. Elias Ward walked out of the Kaleri delegation wing and returned without a scratch but with Kaleri surrender terms in hand. Now, the Kaleri High Command had arrived in person, flanked by diplomatic officers and unarmed escorts, each with neural collars that locked if they lied during testimony. No. Species had demanded them. They brought them voluntarily. The grand halls. Lights dimmed as the council seal illuminated the treaty platform. Maria Chen stepped forward, first pale, but steady. Her ribs were bruised, her left eye swollen, yet her voice cut clear as crystal. We offer no retaliation, no vengeance, just truth, and a warning. She turned toward the gathered envoys. This was not an assassination attempt. It was an orchestration. The Kalari wanted Earth provoked, the Vakari blamed, and the treaty shattered. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Some already suspected it. Now it was official. Maria nodded toward a data core mounted at the center podium. This contains recordings, confessions, command signatures, neural blueprints, proof. The Vakari war priest stepped forward, reading the raw logs as his aides parsed them. His voice, deep and metallic, rang across the chamber. The Kaleri have violated the laws of peace, in word, intent, and action. Phalix stood next barely. His once proud stance had collapsed into shame. The weight of survival had crushed what pride couldn't. He raised one shaking hand and tapped up datapad. A projection appeared, a new surrender pact, written in Earth Standard language first, then translated beneath into the tongues of the stars. At the top, treaty, addendum, the Ward Protocol, below it. No member of a recognized galactic species shall threaten or target a Terran envoy without consequence. Any act of aggression against a diplomatic human representative shall be deemed an act of war against Earth. This is not a threat, it is a promise. One by one, the species signed, not because they feared Earth, but because they feared what Earth had restrained, and because they saw what one man had done without ever firing a shot. Later, in the quiet of the Earth delegation suite, Maria sat beneath dimmed lights. The ache in her ribs pulsed in rhythm with her breath. Elias stood beside the wide observation window, looking out into the stars beyond the station's armor glass. She spoke softly. We didn't win, did we? He didn't turn. No. Maria nodded, but they lost. Finally, he looked back. And that's all we needed. Across the Kaleri home system, Warfleet's powered down. Emergency conscription. Orders were rescinded. The children of generals were withdrawn from bunkers, and a new lesson was added to Kaleri academies. If you ever think a Terran looks harmless, remember Concord Station. Back at the summit, the final treaty was sealed in an alloy casing made of blended ore from Earth, Vakari Prime, and the Kaleri capital moon. No blood, no blade, just names. And at the bottom of the signed record, one line had been engraved in old Terran script, just 6 words. Peace held, because one man stood. Elias Ward didn't take the victory stage. The summit called his name, thundered his title, broadcast his image across 12 systems, but he declined the podium. Instead, he walked alone through the quiet hangar deck of Concord Station, where Earth's envoy, Ship the Resolute, waited. Silently in Docking Bay 7, he preferred it that way. Victory speeches were for generals. He wasn't one. He was just the man who had made it clear what Earth refused to become again. Maria Chen watched from above as Elias prepared the ship for departure. She stood beside the Vakari war priest Threx, whose armor still bore the ceremonial scars of battle, but now had a human engraving on its shoulder. Respect, not fear. He's not coming to the ceremony, she said quietly. Threx growled softly in amusement. That man is the ceremony. Maria smiled faintly. They don't understand him. No, Threx said. his reptilian eyes narrowing. They fear the ones who burn cities, but Elias? They fear him because he didn't have to. As the Resolute lifted off from the station, an unspoken ripple moved through the council halls. The man who had ended the war, with silence and a single AI command, had left without asking for thanks. He left behind no statue, no war trophy, only a new land, a reputation that would outlive stars. On the outer edge of Terran space, Elias piloted through the void with ODIN, watching silently from the console. Status of Kaleri systems. Elias asked, fleet withdrawals. Confirmed. Border stabilization in progress. Galactic Council has initiated a 10-cycle diplomatic watch. He nodded. And Earth.com. But watching. He closed his eyes for a moment. You think they'll try again? ODIN answered after a pause, longer than usual. If they do, they will remember what happened when they threatened the diplomat. Back at Concord Station. A new section was added to the Galactic Peace Archive. Not a monument, not a battlefield, just a dark room with a single playback device. Inside it, visitors could hear the last 20 seconds of Elias's speech to Thalexcom, cold and unforgettable. We don't seek to dominate, but threaten the quiet man in the corner. The one who never raises his voice, and you'll learn why Earth no longer speaks loudly. Years passed. The galaxy grew tense again, as it always did. Alliances shifted. Treaties strained. Whispers of war returned to the stars. But whenever a new power rose and asked, what if we test Earth's resolve? Someone, somewhere, always answered, don't. Remember Elias Ward, because it wasn't the fire that scared them. It was the silence after, and on the edge of Sol System, beneath a cold sun and silent stars. One man sat alone in a ship he didn't name because legends didn't need titles. They only needed to be remembered.